welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the last eyeshadow palette week video for 2020. I've had so much fun this past week and this whole December uploading content every single day for you guys. We are going to end palette week with a palette a day for 25 days. I did this advent calendar style. I've done this 3 other times this year on my channel where I have done a different eyeshadow palette every single day and then shared my looks with you guys. I really like doing this because one, I look back at my pictures and realize like there's probably some work to be done in the blending category, but it's always just fun to reflect on the different like looks that you've done with different eyeshadows, and it also forces me to get use out of so many different eyeshadow palettes throughout my collection. So I really love filming these videos, and I did get some requests to film this again during palette week. So I'm really excited to bring you this video. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel and you love palette content, or you love project panning, or you just love chit-chatting about makeup, I think you would really like it over here, and I would love if you'd consider subscribing. Other than that, let's just get into the video. All right, you guys, so what I did was I wrote 25 different eyeshadow palettes throughout my palette collection. I wrote them all on slips of paper and put them in an advent calendar. So I didn't necessarily start on December 1st because I wanted to give myself enough leeway to get this video filmed and uploaded by the 26th. But alas, I do have 25 different looks to share with you guys. And if you feel like a lot of these looks are kind of like the same and a little bit neutral, please bear in mind I do go to work 5 days a week. So many of these days, this was like the eyeshadow I was wearing to work. So I'm gonna put my little slips of paper down. I'm not gonna go in order like I wore this on the 1st and then this on the 2nd. I'm just gonna go in order of, I have them laid out by brands. So yeah, let's get into the palettes and the looks that I created using these palettes. Today's drink of the day is Alani Nu Breezeberry. I feel like a broken record. I have been drinking this so much, but I'm literally obsessed with this flavor. All right, you guys, let's start with Melt Cosmetics. I did create a look using both my Melt Rust palette as well as my Melt Gemini. I really like Melt Cosmetics and I love both of these eyeshadow palettes. I would say that the Melt Rust is definitely a more wearable eyeshadow palette for me day to day. And the look that I created with this was just a really bronzy, almost like yellowy gold sort of look. I honestly feel like I don't necessarily know that I remember exactly how I created each look, so I don't know that I'm going to share how I created each look with you guys other than just share the look with you and share the palette. I know that I tried to use as many shades as possible when I created this look, and I think I dipped into a different palette for the like golden shimmer all over my eyes, but I really love the yellows and mustards in the Rust palette, so I definitely wanted to use them to create the look that you are seeing. Oh, I should scoot over. The look that I created with the Melt Gemini, I was kind of obsessed with. I always get nervous reaching into the Melt Gemini because they are grungier tones and I am not the most confident in my blending skills. You guys will see there are some days that I definitely could have blended a little bit better, but I absolutely love the way that this green look turned out. I do remember specifically for this look, I did reach into the Kaleidos Escape Pod to use one of the green shimmers to top this look with, and I love how that turned out. And I used a bright green in the inner corner, which I also really love, but I used all of the greens in this eyeshadow palette to create the look that you're seeing. I also reached into the two like grungy, warmer, like mustard and bronze brownie shades to create this look, and I really love the way that this one turned out. Whenever I reach into this palette, I feel obligated to play with the greens because I just love green eyeshadow so much. Next up, I have the Sydney Grace Tiny Marbles palette that was in collaboration with Mel Thompson. I adore this eyeshadow palette, and the look that I created was just a very neutral mauve toned look that I wore to work. I can't remember, I think I used one of the highlighting shades out of the Natasha Denona Love palette for the inner corner, but I believe everything else was out of this eyeshadow palette. I think that the mattes and the shimmers are so beautiful in the Tiny Marvels, and I believe that this is available again. I highly recommend this eyeshadow palette. I included this in my non-boring neutrals eyeshadow palette video that I filmed at the beginning of the week. I will link that in case you're interested, but I love that this is an approachable palette, and it's not just like the browns, like your average browns that you get from most eyeshadow palettes. These browns definitely have different undertones that I don't have in my other palettes as well. So I just think this is such a unique eyeshadow palette. Absolutely love it. So versatile. You can do mauves, purples, brown, like you can do so many different things with this eyeshadow palette. Highly recommend it. All right, speaking of mauve tones, I created a very similar look to the Tiny Marbles one with the Huda Naughty palette. I have really enjoyed my time with the Huda Naughty palette so far. I mean, I know it's expensive, but I really do recommend this one. I definitely have started to use black eyeliner a lot more in looks that I have or am creating. So as you'll see in this one, it's really just like a mauvey pink sort of look with a little bit of black liner. Again, I wore this to work and I really love the way that this one turned out. I will say, even when I reach into the shades that look like they're a little bit more brown toned in this palette, I still feel like they pull pretty mauve. So if you're not a fan of mauve toned eyeshadow palette looks, if you're not a fan of mauve toned eyes, I really wouldn't recommend this palette. But if you like mauves, this is a great palette. And then let's just stick with my Huda looks. So I did also create a look with both Haze palettes, which I have mentioned on my channel before are not my favorite from her. Usually I love her little mini Obsessions palettes, but I wasn't the biggest fan of either of these. I still like the look that I created, especially with the khaki palette. So this one, I think my problem with this is most of the looks that I've created with this aren't as green as I would like, and I really like greens, as I mentioned before, so I was really excited for this palette. But everything that I create is just like warm bronzy copper, which is kind of what I created with this as well. This is something I'm sure I wore to work. I do really like the way that this turned out. I will say the shimmers in here are a little bit more chunky, and I feel like you can kind of tell on the picture with my eyes looking down, like they're just chunkier, they're a little bit harder to work with, they're not very smooth. So not my favorite eyeshadow palette formula, but I do still like the way that this look turned out. And then from the Sand Haze, this was definitely more of a dramatic look, one that definitely probably could have been blended a little bit better. This one, I will say the shimmers in this aren't as chunky or as flaky as the Khaki Haze, so they're a little bit easier to work with. So this palette is a little bit more easy to work with than the Khaki palette in my opinion, at least the majority of the shades. I just feel like it takes a lot of building to get what you're going for, and I feel like, I can't remember specifically, but I think this look that I created, I feel like I used another palette to deepen it up. This is definitely could have been blended better, but yeah, that's my look with the Huda Khaki, or Huda Sand Haze. Next up we have a look with my Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette. I love this palette as well. I think this is another super versatile palette. You can do mauve tone looks with this, you can do really rich warm looks with this, with some of the yellows, oranges, and reds. I personally opted for a purple tone look with this. I know that I used this shade right here as like that sparkly topper sort of shade. I think that this is beautiful. I will say I thought it was gonna be, I didn't realize it was going to be more of like an eyeshadow topper. I thought it was going to be more of a metallic shimmer, but I do kind of like it as a topper. And I really enjoyed the way that this look turned out as well. I think I only have 1 or 2 pictures of this one, but I really like this. Again, really versatile palette. I've done a lot of different things with this one. If you can still get your hands on this, I would recommend this palette. When I was creating, or when I was writing my palettes on the slips of paper for this, I knew I wanted to include my Tarte Unleashed palette, just because I feel like this palette has gotten neglected this year, and I really enjoyed this palette. So I went for a mauve tone look with this one as well. Again, I've really been enjoying mauve tones lately. I feel like I definitely reached into, I think, the Pat McGrath Rose Decadence palette for the lid topper shade, but I used this row to create the base for this look, and I really enjoy the way that this look turned out as well. I've just been so into like pinky mauves. So into them. I do still really enjoy this palette. I'm glad that I included this because it reminded me how much I love the Tarte Unleashed palette, and unfortunately it got neglected this year. One of my most recent looks was with the Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. You guys would have seen this, I think, recently in a video. I can't remember which one I filmed. can't remember which videos I filmed with these palettes. I did a more dramatic look with this palette, and I wanted to do like neutral on top with some blue on the bottom. I've also been fiddling around with winged liner, and I haven't perfected it yet. So I did do a wing with this, but it's obviously not a perfect wing. I don't mind the way that this look turned out. It obviously would have been cuter if it was like a more perfected wing, and I mean, I don't know, I just need to keep playing around with makeup. Makeup's just fun for me. I don't ever claim to be a professional, and I don't know, I don't mind the way that this look turned out. I do love the Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. I've raved about this many times on my channel. I think it's a great neutral palette with some really high impact foiled shades, and I think this is a good palette. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to Urban Decay. I did a couple of looks where I incorporated the Stone Vibes, but the day that I pulled the Stone Vibes as my palette to use, I did this really kind of like neutral, but kind of reminded me of just like your classic glam holiday look. I don't even really remember what I used to create the base. I think I just used Anecdote and a little bit of Hexed, like really lightly. And then I used Tiger's Eye all over the lid. I absolutely love the way that this look turned out, and obviously I had to pair it with a red lip, so that was using the Urban Decay Stone Vibes. I love this palette. I feel like I've seen really mixed reviews on this. Like, people either really love it or they really don't love it. I think if you're bothered by using your fingers to use a shadow, you wouldn't like this, because really the shimmer shades only perform well with a finger. With a finger, they're super high impact and really beautiful. So I love the Urban Decay Stone Vibes palette. Okay, let's move on to my Pat McGrath Rose Decadence. I have used the heck out of this palette this year, and this is one that I even paired with some of my mauve looks that I've already showed you. But for this look specifically, I think I must have used potentially a light pink shade out of probably my Huda Nude Medium, either that or my Huda Naughty palette. And then I used this really lightly to deepen up the look. And then usually I would mix these two shades. Like, I would put this on the outer corner of the eye and then this on like the first half of the eye to create the look that you're seeing. I've done this look literally so many times, and I always pop on a little bit of liner to the top lash line with this one too, just to complete the look. This is like one of my standard go-to looks of the year. I probably have worn this look the most consistently the entire year, and I really love this. I haven't even had this palette the whole year, but I have just loved creating this look. And then speaking of Pat McGrath, I also created a look with the not this one, with the Divinity Luxe Quad and Interstellar Icon. And for this, I used, again, a lot of the Urban Decay Stone Vibes. In fact, I created the base with Stone Vibes, again, using Anecdote and Hexed. And then I mixed the blue shade from this palette with Opal Aura in the Urban Decay Stone Vibes to create the look that you're seeing. And then I did winged liner with this look as well. I love the way that this one turned out. I've been having a ton of fun with blues lately, and I think this palette is beautiful. I will say I really have mostly just reached into the blue in this palette. I've reached for every other shade once, but it's the blue that I reach into time and time again with this one. So there's that. And then speaking of the Pat McGrath quads, I actually pulled the Persona Identity palette for the look that you're seeing, but I mixed it with this Pat McGrath palette. So for the look that you're seeing, I used a mixture of Humble, Charming, and Humble, Charming, and Sassy, and then I did the lavender shade, Lavender Blue, all over the lid to create this look, and I absolutely love the way that this turned out. I know a lot of people have said that they don't love this quad because it doesn't have any of the special shades, but I personally think especially the Lavender Blue shade, as well as Iridescent Orchard, is that what that is? Or is this Lotus Paradise? I never know how. This one would be Iridescent Orchard. I think that these are really nice, and I have loved every look that I've created with this eyeshadow palette, so I really love this quad personally. With the Jackie ABH palette, obviously I had to include this. I just did a really neutral look. This is something that I wore to work, and whenever I create this look, this is like my go-to look with this palette. I just use ginger edges credit and Zam all over the lid, and it is so stunningly beautiful. My absolute go-to look with this palette. I wanted to use Sponsored, but sometimes I'm a little hesitant to wear green to work. This is an eyeshadow palette I love for work as well because these shadows just last forever. They don't wear, like, they don't fade throughout the day. They last forever. So I love the look that I created with this palette, but I always enjoy my looks with the Jackie ABH palette. All right, let's move on to Natasha Denona. I did a lot of Natasha Denona this time around. So let's jump into my Natasha Denona Biba. I love the look I created with this. This was a very neutral look. I wore this to work, and I used Buff, Freckle, Prairie, and then I did Shine all over the lid, I believe. No, Tone all over the lid, and then I think I did either Shine or Monroe in the like inner corner. This is a beautiful palette. I know it's super expensive, but if you don't have a large eyeshadow palette collection and you just want like a solid neutral palette that you can wear every single day, I highly recommend investing in this one. I think it's amazing. The quality is phenomenal. The mattes are so easy to work with, so I like to reach for this one a lot when going to work because I know it's just gonna work for me. The mattes are gonna blend. I'm not gonna have issues with things looking patchy. They're gonna blend really quick, really easy, and I really love this palette. I wish I had not slept on this one for so long because I think it's so good. Okay, and then I also pulled my Lila palette out, and I love the look that I created with the Lila palette. So I used a pink shade. I wanna say from, I don't know where the pink matte came from. I'm gonna be honest, I can't remember. It was like a peachy pink matte. And then I did this green duochrome all over the lid. And also topped it with a little bit of the shade Bloodstone from the Urban Decay Stone Vibes. As you can tell, I've really been loving the Stone Vibes. And then in the inner corner for that little like pink, the bright pink, I used one of the highlighting shades out of the Natasha Denona Love Glow Cheek Palette. And then I did a wing with this one, and I freaking adore the way that this one turned out. This shade from the Natasha Denona Lila, the Duochrome, is one of my favorite shades. It's, ooh, that swatch was not good. It's hard to catch on camera sometimes, but it really does shift from like a red to a green. And then the Bloodstone shade from the Urban Decay Stone Vibes kind of does the same, but the Natasha one definitely pulls more red and the Stone Vibes pulled more green. So I loved layering the two. I thought it was super beautiful, and this was one of my favorite looks that I created the entire month. Then I did a ton of my Natasha Denona minis. So with my Natasha Denona Mini Retro, I just took Vintage all over, topped it with this lid topper shade, I think in Pixie or Galaxy, I don't ever know which one's which. Topped it with this lid topper shade, did a wing, and then I used a like champagne eyeliner on my lower lash line. The picture that you're going to see, clearly I did not blend out my nose contour. I don't know what's going on with that, but I really did my nose contour. What the heck? I really did love the way that this one turned out as well. I love reaching for the Mini Retro. I always like the looks that I create with this one as well. I also did a look with my Natasha Denona Mini Gold. So sometimes I don't love this palette. It's definitely not my favorite mini palette just because sometimes I struggle to think of a look to create just with this palette alone. This was one of the first looks that I created, and I think I may have also dipped into the Gemini palette to create this look. I think I reached into like that like warmer like mustard shade in the Gemini palette for blowing it out in the crease, but then I used the green shade in the crease as well, and then I used this gold shade and I did this in the outer corner to create the look that you're seeing, and I actually really loved the way that this look turned out as well. I think this is just more of like a companion palette, but this makes a great companion to the Gemini palette, so I loved the way that that look turned out. And then also I have a look with the Mini Nude. So with the Mini Nude, I just did like a warm nude look with a little bit of a wing on this one as well. I did a wing using this eyeshadow shade rather than using a pencil, and I don't necessarily love the way that this turned out, but I do remember I wore this to work that day and people like kept complimenting me, so like I'll take it. I love the mini nude. I think it's very easy, very approachable, very wearable, very easy to create wear to work looks, so that was a fun one to get to use. My Nabla Dreamy 2. I don't necessarily love the way that this one is pictured, but I filmed wearing this and I love the way that my look turned out with this eyeshadow palette. So for this I used I always hold my palettes upside down. I used Pantheon, Deja Vu, New Past, and then I also did, I did Libertine all over the lid, and this is almost like a pressed glitter. It has a lot of texture and grit to it, and it just is so high impact on the eyes. I obviously did a wing with this one as well, and I feel like my wing was okay with this. Definitely not perfect, but I loved the way this look turned out. I say all the time, I love the Nabla Dreamy 2 palette. I always look into this and I'm like, not that creatively inspired, and then I get going and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel so inspired by this palette. I always love the looks that I create using this, so highly recommend this palette. I just picked up the Dreamy Original, so I can't wait to play around with that. And I actually have the Nabla side-by-side palette on my eyes today. Next up I have my Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction, and I actually did something different than I normally do with this palette. I did more of like a mauve toned look with this, and really what I did with this is I used, I think it was this matte shade in the crease, and then I did this shade right here all over the lid with a wing, and that was really it. And I didn't realize how freaking beautiful that shade was. It's not going to do it justice on camera. In person, I absolutely loved this look, one of my favorites, and it definitely made me re-inspired to be a little bit more creative with my Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction. So that was my look with this one. Yeah. The ColourPop Solstice palette, she's got Solstice. I actually really enjoyed the look I did with this one too, and the reason being, I really love the shade Super Stardust. It's kind of like, I don't know, this might be a Super Shock shadow. It is, yeah, I feel like this has to be a Super Shock shadow. Really intense. That was one of the worst swatches ever. It is just really intense on the lids. I did a wing with this one as well. I will say this is definitely more pinky than I originally thought, but I used Earth Angel, Quasar, Chromosphere, and Super Stardust, then did a wing to create the look you're seeing. This was another one that I really enjoyed from this batch of looks. And then also I did a look with the That's Taupe palette. This one I did not necessarily love the way that this turned out. This was one of my first looks with this palette. I will say I don't love this palette as much as I thought I was going to. It's a lot more powdery, and it's a lot more cool toned than I had thought. Initially I knew it was going to be cool toned, but it's just really gray. So I did a really smoky look. I used Slated all over the eyes, and I used Pebble Beach Python and Rocksteady. I tried to deepen it up with Bedrock, but I also just wasn't loving the way everything was blending together either. So definitely not one of my favorite looks that I created. I still liked it, and the more I reached for this palette, the more I like it, but this look in particular was not my fave. Next up we have my Kaleidos Sashimi City, and I freaking adore this palette. I think that this one is beautiful. I wore this look to work, and it was a little bit shimmery and intense because this shade right here, which I put all over the lid, is super sparkly, but I just used the 3 mattes to create my base, and then I popped this sparkly shimmer on. I have like nothing left to swatch with. I'm gonna mix whatever. There it is, kind of swatched on the center of my hand. I don't know how well you'll be able to see. It has like a green and pinky peach shift. It is such a beautiful shade. I adore this palette. So this is another favorite look that I created this past month. All right, you guys, and then the last look that I have to share is from my ColourPop Going Coconuts palette. This was another one I loved. I wore this to work. I really like this palette just because it is so neutral, not too warm, not too cool. And for this, I used Lovely Bunch, Shell Yeah, and Cocoa Crush. I just used this whole row, and I freaking adored the way that this turned out. It was just a nice, soft, neutral look, really beautiful. I think that this palette is amazing and would just be the perfect neutral palette that really can pair with anything, can match any outfit that you might be like. It's just a great palette. I'm also upset with myself for sleeping on this one so long because this is absolutely worth the hype that it gets. Whew. All All right, you guys, I am sweating and I have a little 5-year-old that now wants to go to Target. So we're gonna wrap this video up. Those are the 25 different eyeshadow palette looks with the 25 palettes that I have been using the last 25 days. I would love to know, what palettes have you been reaching for a ton lately? What are your favorite maybe color stories to play with in terms of eyeshadow palettes? Other than that, that is going to wrap it up for today's video and for palette week, but we still do have content through the rest of the year. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel, for supporting this video, for supporting Vlogmas, for supporting me. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye.
Bye.